A Meowy Christmas. In the small town of Winterberry, Christmas Eve was a magical time, blanketed by fresh snow and adorned with sparkling lights. The streets were lined with cozy homes, their windows glowing warmly, and the scent of pine and cinnamon lingered in the air. But in one little house on Maple Lane, there was one special resident who made this Christmas extra memorable, a ginger cat named Oliver. Oliver wasn't your typical cat. While many cats were known for their aloof, independent ways, Oliver was different. He loved attention, loved cuddling, and most of all, he loved Christmas. Every year, he would carefully inspect the Christmas tree as it went up, batting at the ornaments with his paws and meowing in delight at the sparkling lights. His humans Millie and her daughter Emma would laugh and say he was the true spirit of Christmas. This year, however, there was something different about Christmas Eve. Millie and Emma were busy preparing for the evening's festivities, wrapping presents, baking cookies, and stringing garlands, but Oliver couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He prowled around the house, his ginger fur almost glowing in the soft light of a tree. Meow, he muttered to himself, looking up at the star that topped the tree. It twinkled brightly, but it didn't feel quite as magical as it usually did. Oliver padded over to the window and peered outside at the snow falling gently from the sky. The world seemed peaceful, serene. Yet, something deep in his feline instincts told him that this Christmas, he had to do more. Emma, with her brown pigtails and rosy cheeks, entered the room, carrying a basket of freshly baked gingerbread cookies. "Hey, Oliver, look at all the cookies we made," she said, placing the basket on the table. Oliver sniffed the air and gave a little excited meow. Gingerbread was his absolute favorite. He jumped up onto the table, sniffing at the cookies, but then paused. His golden eyes flicked toward the window again, and his tail swished with determination. He needed to find something to do something special. Millie walked in just as Oliver leapt from the table and dashed out the door. "Oliver, where are you going?" she called, but the door closed behind him with a soft thud. Oliver trotted down the snow-covered sidewalk, his paws leaving soft prints in the freshly fallen snow. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine filled his nose. He looked around the neighborhood. Everything was so quiet, so peaceful, but there was one thing missing. The houses were all decorated, but none of the trees had a cat's touch. No ornaments hung low enough for a curious kitty to bat at. There were no stockings hung just right for a cat to sneak into. He had to change that. Oliver's first stop was Mrs. Kringle's house. Mrs. Kringle was the town's elderly cat lover, and her home was always filled with treats for the neighborhood cats. He scampered up to her front door and gave a soft meow. Mrs. Kringle opened the door, her round glasses perched on her nose. "Well, hello, Oliver. Are you here for some Christmas treats?" she asked, chuckling as she bent down to scratch his ears. Oliver gave a contented purr, but then looked up at the tree in her window. It was beautiful, but it lacked something. A few ornaments were missing, ones that would make it sparkle even more. He gave a small meow and pointed a paw toward the tree. "You want to help decorate?" Mrs. Kringle asked, her eyes twinkling. "I thought you might. I just didn't know how." With that, Oliver hopped up onto the windowsill and batted gently at an ornament hanging low on the tree. Mrs. Kringle giggled, then handed him a small, golden bell to add to the branch. Oliver carefully placed it on the tree, his tail flicking with satisfaction. He looked up at the tree, his whiskers twitching in approval. It was perfect now. As he left Mrs. Kringle's house, he noticed a flicker of light from across the street. He trotted over to see, and to his surprise, it was the local animal shelter's tree. But the poor tree seemed a little bare. It was small, and though there were lights and a few ornaments, it didn't have the festive feel it deserved. Oliver's heart swelled. He padded over to the shelter, meowing softly at the door until it opened, and there stood Mrs. Finch, the kind shelter worker. "Oh, Oliver, what a lovely surprise. What can I do for you, my dear?" she asked, bending down to scratch him behind the ears. Oliver looked up at the tree and then at the basket of extra ornaments beside her. He tapped one of the ornaments with his paw and then looked back at her with a hopeful gaze. Mrs. Finch smiled, understanding immediately. She picked up the ornament and handed it to him. "Go on, Oliver. It's yours to put on the tree." With great care, Oliver placed the ornament on the shelter's tree, right near the top. It shone beautifully in the soft light, adding a touch of warmth to the little tree. Mrs. Finch clapped her hands in delight. "What a wonderful Christmas helper you are, Oliver. I'm sure the cats here will be very grateful for your help. This tree will make them feel loved." Oliver purred contentedly, his heart full of joy. He had done it. He had brought a little more sparkle to Christmas for those who needed it most. As he trotted back home, the snow still falling around him, Oliver felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the cold night air. He was happy. The tree was perfect. The animals at the shelter would feel at home. And his Christmas wish had come true. He had made the world a little bit brighter, one paw at a time. Back at Millie's house, he slipped through the door just as Emma called out, "Oliver, where were you?" Oliver meowed happily and trotted over to the tree. Emma looked at him in wonder. "You look so content," she said, ruffling his ginger fur. He gave a soft meow and curled up under the tree, the golden lights casting a warm glow over the room. As the family settled down around him, Emma added, "This is the best Christmas ever." Oliver's eyes twinkled as he purred in agreement. It had been a very meowy Christmas indeed.